Welcome to Roll for Crit Spotlight. I'm Jonathan.
I'm Will.
Spotlight is a series in which we invite members of the tabletop gaming world to share their experiences and talk about the industry itself. Our guest today is the director of game development and co-founder of Shadowborne Games. He's also the designer of games like Oathsworn, Into the Deepwood. Jaime Jolly, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Hey.
How you doing over there from across the pond?
It's getting cold now. It's getting cold. We've all got our winters on.
Yeah, it's starting to get a little chilly here as well.
Everywhere the weather is doing crazy things, but we're just going to focus on our game design talks, and there's a lot of things that we can talk about. We've been playing Oathsworn, we've been following it all along the way, and we're eager to hear more.
So why don't we start off with, why don't you give us some of the backstory and how you got started in game design and how this led to the formation of the Shadowborne Games as a company?
Well, I'm quite a weird person, really. I've gaming is I've kind of given my life over to gaming in different ways. Like, so I've got a degree in games design, which is a thing you can do. When I started, when we had that, it was back in the early 2000s. There were 2 universities in the whole of England that you could do games design in, and I found one of them. And that was pretty exciting because I got to go there and learn and basically get to play games as my degree and learn about game theory and the math behind it and how to, I suppose it's like stuff like how to really encapsulate fun in systems and things like that. That was it. But then after games design is kind of one of those weird degrees as well. It's very hard to get a job in games design. You've got to spend a lot of time kind of like getting into the industry and finding your home with that stuff. So we for a long time after that, I did things like youth work and teaching. I was working for charities a lot of the time, but all that time I found myself basically in games design positions within companies. So, for instance, one of my things, I used to work for the YMCA, and I was a kind of itinerant game designer. I would go around the county and make games for like youth groups and for like national events and things like that, and we'd be doing kind of like big old wide games and organizing like murder mysteries and weird things, just writing all this content, doing all these different things to get gaming into these charities to help engagement with like kids and with fundraising and stuff like that. Eventually I ended up in a very weird way where I ended up running a circus as part of that. I ended up running it was called the Community Circus Project, and basically I ran a fun day in a van that used to go around like running games and doing all weird stuff. So we'd rock up to this field with a van full of like sumo suits and bouncy castles and like weird games we'd make and like all kinds of like the Crystal Maze and all this stuff that we'd bring out, and we'd dump it in a field and like invite the community in, and we'd have all these games that we'd play. So it was kind of an odd road, but but along all the way through that period, I was playing board games with my friends. We had a geek night type thing that nearly everyone has, I'm sure, in the industry, and we were playing games. I was just enamored, like absolutely enamored. The idea of like when you're doing youth work is interesting. When you do kind of kids work and youth work, you spend ages designing this elaborate like game for kids, and you've got 30 of them running around, and you just like spend weeks kind of getting it all laid out for them, and then it's kind of over. And it's done, and you spent all this time, and then you kind of move on to the next thing because you can't play that game again. But the idea of getting fun and putting it in a box and being able to give it to lots of people seemed a really efficient route to help help people enjoy their life. You know, just actually putting fun in a box and then being able to give it to loads of different people. So that was what really struck me, and so it was then the beginning of the road into board gaming professionally. So I was a professional games designer in other capacities, but then it was how can we make this into board games? And so that was the road between like wanting to start that and where we are kind of now is nearly a 10-year process. It took a long time to find my feet in how to make this work and how to make this happen, and it still may not work. That's important. That's happening. We're recording this on the eve of this Kickstarter we've been working on for 3 years now, and we haven't made a penny yet. So it's like every word I say with a grain of salt, because this may be a great lesson in how to fail at Kickstarter.
No, we've seen the future. It's going to work out.
Mm-hmm. For people who maybe are getting a degree in game design, just like you did, do you have maybe some quick tips for them where they should maybe start off?
Honestly, and this is I suppose it's hard to say, but really that's very much in its seminal kind of its stages. It's like the where gaming sits in society. Because obviously, like just before, like the generation before us saw gaming as a thing children did, right? That was it, and so there's only the first like kind of shoots growing out of that becoming recognised. So I think in the future, the provision for education in games design is going to be much more central to people as they realise that actually like the game industry and computer games and board games is massive, and it's just growing, and it's going to become more and more the kind of the thing that people spend their time doing for leisure. But when it's hard for me to comment because I was doing this 10 years ago, and in the beginning 10 years ago, the provision wasn't great. Like people were really feeling their way in the dark. And so I would say honestly that I learned a lot more from weirdly from places like Yale. Like they actually put all of their game theory lectures, for instance, are on YouTube, and you can go and watch their game theory lectures, and they're wonderful, right? A lot of the highbrow universities in America, they have whole film crews in there filming their lectures, and so you can learn all kinds of amazing stuff. But the game theory lectures and things like that are amazing. And then again, like if you're looking at then specifically about the board game industry, like watching you guys, right, is probably the best thing you do. If you want an education in board games, like watch Roll for Crit, watch all these YouTube channels that are just they're kind of they've got their finger on the pulse, right, of gaming, because gaming changes so quickly, and there's so many so much innovation. It's just crazy engine for innovation, and so being able to keep up with that is probably one of the most important things in game design. That's why I said it was quite a long process, right? It was like 10 years, but really the last 5 years of my life has been absolutely solidly researching what are people wanting and where is it going? Where is there space for games in the market? Because there's a lot of games out there. There's 100,000 plus like entries in BGG, right? So like if you want to do anything in kind of the board game world, you need to be able to see where those gaps are. So where is there a game? Where is there something that people have got a heart for that you can design and fill that gap? Because there's no point in inventing something that's already been made, right? There's just no value. So if you're not adding value to the community, then why bother? It's just going to be a lot of your time wasted. And I think it's very easy to do that. Like you could spend years designing a game that when you bring it to market, you could find out someone's already designed it 5 years ago if you're not careful. So like spending loads of effort making sure that when you make something, no one else has made it, like it's definitely adding something that's worthwhile. That's when you start to really I think that's when you start to really think, okay, this is serious. I should invest in this thing, because finding those points in the market are very few and far between. Because there's so many great games out there, right? There's so many good games. We absolutely love games. But the good thing is that also we stand on the shoulder of giants with games design. Like, so someone does something incredible like deck building, and then people like take it and iterate on it, and there's like thousands of games come out of it, and then someone will come up with a new design, like bag building, like that kind of thing that came last year was the thing. Now there's kind of bag building games coming out as left, right, and center as people kind of seeing what they can do with that idea. So it's really wonderful on that as well, because if you keep on the forefront of that wave, you can see like where things are moving or where the next kind of improvement might be, because it's all about getting as much fun into as small a space as possible, right? All the time. So and we're getting pretty good at that now. Like people are designing some amazing stuff.
Yeah, you don't have to tell us about how many games there are, because we see them every week, and it is overwhelming. So yeah, that's the tricky part, is finding that niche that you can fill that no one's done before. I'm still trying to get over the fact, because I read your Board Game Geek bio and you mentioned running away to the circus, and I thought that was a joke. Not a joke. You really kind of did that. So that's great. Now, we've been talking a lot about the process of you getting into game design in the first place, but once you were there and you started this company, Shadowborne Games, you're not the only one at this company. How did you get other people on board? There's a lot of people who do things like the art, design, the marketing, of course. A lot of different aspects go into the creation of a board game. What was it like getting those people on board, and how do you manage divvying up all those tasks between everyone and collaborating on projects together?
Yeah, so we kind of move in a way out of the world of games design and into game development there, and they're two very different beasts. Like they're two very different worlds. Game game development it's got all of the major kind of pitfalls and potentials of a small company, right? You've got this, you need to have people covering every one of the different aspects that you need to bring this thing to market. So it's not just like the games design. You've got the art, and you've got the components, you've got engineering, you've got supply chain management, you've got advertising, you've got communication, it's just, and you've got to be able to hit all of them at a really high level. You've got to be able to hit them well, because the community deserves a really, really good service, right? So you've got to try and find the best people for that task when you're doing it. So I mean, in the early days, really right at the beginning, over 3 years ago now, it was just me and Toby, who's our sculptor, and we started off having, because he was the sculptor on my first game, and we spent time talking about just it was a passion thing. It was just talking about how much we loved fantasy worlds and grimdark fantasy and all that sort of thing. And we started to then talk about, like, could you make a game in that space? Is there space enough for the game? As we started to feel like yes, there was, and there's places you can go with the dark fantasy kind of thing, and how bringing more modern board games mechanics into it, but then really high quality miniatures, and then all this beautiful art, and then a world class story, and trying to like wrap it all together in this thing. It was a crazy dream, right? It was ridiculous. It took us 3 years just to see it get to this point. But that, in those early days, it was literally just sitting down, me and him, for like 6 hours at a time on a Sunday night. I'd have a whiskey, he wouldn't have a beer because he doesn't drink any. He doesn't actually drink at all. But we just sit and just talk about what sort of world it is. So we were building this world up from the ground up, because we wanted to make a world where people cared about the lore, they cared about the people in it, and stuff like that. So it had to be a story, because often. It's kind of a trope, isn't it? Like the game stories are kind of like a tacked on thing a little bit. Like they often, they're part of that initial that initial ideas wave, but they tend not to be overly developed, because it tends to be much more about the mechanical stuff that's going on the table. But we really wanted to kind of spend a lot of time around that story and make sure it's things. So we actually spent the best part of a year just going over that story and where we were going, where we were doing that. So by the time we came to approaching others, we felt very, I suppose, quite confident about the strength of the world and the basic concept. So that was the thing, I suppose, is we managed to spend the best part of a year just basically proving to ourselves that it was worth talking to other people about, which is a tough thing, because I think if you kind of approach people not knowing that you've got this thing, where you're going with it. So that way, when we were talking to people, we could say, like, this is how it's going to work. This is, it's going to have this box and this box, and these are going to be some of the mechanisms we're going to have. We have this story, and this is the way it interacts with this. And we had this whole almost like a pitch that we could say to people and say, look, this is, because when you're kind of building a team, you have to be able to sell that to the team before you sell it to anyone else. You've got to be able to say, look, you got to come along this ride with us to make this thing. And so we that year kind of allowed us to prove to ourselves and give us confidence that we could speak to other people about it. So I suppose confidence is part of that process. But then when we started to go and talk to people, we were already fans of a bunch of people. So like knowing people in the industry is quite useful. So if you're like a budding games designer, or you're interested in some ideas of developing games, there's some wonderful areas where you can go and find people. Like, so for instance, for art, DeviantArt is really, really good. And perhaps in my flavor, my taste even better is ArtStation. ArtStation is this kind of home for professional artists, concept designers, and literally you can they have their emails. You've got people who have got maybe 40,000 subscribers on their ArtStation. They're world-class artists who work for these amazingly large companies, and they'll have their email there, and you can just like, hi, how you doing? Let's have a chat. And I suppose over all of the stuff that we've learned about this process, it's really been that you can, especially in board gaming and this type of thing, you can reach every level, every strata, every echelon of kind of talent from your room, effectively being able to connect with people. You can just you can get to some amazing YouTubers, you can get to some amazing artists, you can get to world-class writers, like even James Cosmo, right? James Cosmo, our narrator, like you can find their agent, and you can email them and say, yeah, hi, how's it, we've got this thing coming up, is this the sort of thing your actor might be interested in? And then they come back and say yes or no and all that sort of thing. So it's just wonderful. Like there's very few I think professional endeavors where you can immediately get to everybody you could possibly want to get to, in terms of being able to recruit people into a team. Often there's a lot of closed doors, and there's contacts you need to be able to make. You need to be part of a thing for years and years and years before you kind of open those gates. But board gaming is wonderful. It's one of the few truly, I think, open spaces still for development where people are genuinely interested in what you're making, and so they'll kind of connect with that. So that's what we found is, I think the key takeaway for anyone of that is that it, like, you really can connect. If you've got something that's worth people's time, like, people will talk to you and they will come and help, they will join you, if it's worth their time. And they're just wonderful people as well. They'll throw their lot in with you. We've had people who've been working for, they've just offered their services for free just to come and join us with the thing, to come and write with us, or to come along with us on the journey, because they like it. So we just got, there's just some wonderful people who've been on team with that. So another key thing we found was that the first person we went and talked to when we were developing was Dongjon, our artist, and his brother Dong Baolu. Now he's a world famous artist, amongst artists. He's not like a common household name, but he is incredibly famous in terms of the art community. And when we went and talked to him, we went to ArtStation, we found him, we had a chat. But what really, I think, also helped open doors a lot was the quality of his art, just how wonderful, like, that visualization of the world. Once we had this idea of a world and we could say to him, like, this is what this is, can you make it? And then he'd draw something. Him and his brother would draw something, and it'd be just like this incredible like visualization. And then what we could do is that, I think that really helped open other doors, because then what you do is you could then go and talk to new people and say, hi, we've got this game, it's got these mechanics, it's got this story, and here, have a look at this piece of art. Do you want to get involved in a game that's making this type of art? And they'll be like, yes. Yes.
No, I mean, like with food, people say you eat with your eyes first, and there's definitely the same through with Kickstarter. I mean, I'm sure Jonathan would agree with me, there's plenty of ones we've looked, and because they didn't get an artist yet, maybe, or sometimes the art isn't that great, and you're just like, have they really put in the effort yet? Yeah. I mean, they probably did, but like, that's in your mind nagging at you. So to see that nice art right off the bat, a lot of people are like, they're ready. They know what they want. They're going in. This is something I want to tack my horse onto.
I think some of the best games in the world haven't yet managed to find their way to market yet because of that truth. That to bridge the gap between, because you don't actually ever know a game is the best game you've ever played until you play it, right? You actually have to play it, and so you have to bridge a gap between, like, a person who's just looking around at the world of board gaming with thousands of, like, adverts and things coming at them all the time, and them actually playing the game and loving it with all their heart. So it's like, how do you bridge that gap? And art is really like the bridger that will help you get to that space. Because if you bring nice art, and I suppose it also it reflects the passion that you have for the project, I think, because ultimately art costs money, quite a lot of money, right? And so if you're prepared to put your money behind something, then people automatically kind of give it more credence, because they, like, you believe in it enough to risk your own savings, to risk your own, like, situation to be able to try and bring this into the world. People respect that, I think, inherently, and they're like, okay, I respect that this is thing. Now, sadly, the reality is that a lot of people don't have the kind of money that it requires to develop a game. So and so honestly, this is a probably one of the sadder things, I think, is that some people don't have they won't have the money to get over that first hurdle of getting some art out there, getting some stuff out there, and being able to do. I mean, our game has been just an unbelievably expensive undertaking. Being one of the biggest games ever made, it's cost a huge amount. But that's been staged, as we knew we had something that was kind of gaining strength over time. We knew we needed to invest more and more in it, because we knew that we kind of got these triggers that were like, you have something and it's going to be okay in the long run. And so we started off small, and then building that kind of budget up over time as we kind of knew more and more that this is going to be able to be okay, we think. And again, we haven't made a single penny yet, and it starts next week, so we don't know how that'll go. But yeah, we kind of our trust built with what we were able to show people with the artwork and the story and the models and everything else as it kind of built up, and we got a lot of good kind of nods from people saying, yeah, okay, this is worth you making, and that people will like it.
Well, I mean, speaking of Oathsworn, we keep talking about the process there. Let's actually get into it. Now you already talked about how you put a lot more time into the story, which is definitely something we enjoy a lot. We enjoy story games, but there's also the mechanics. I'm curious, what were some of the inspirations from maybe the world, building the world and what is Oathsworn, but also maybe some of the game mechanics, because you didn't just come into this blank. You have some other games, that your name is on. So I'm curious how both the story mechanics sort of evolved to what is now Oathsworn.
So, I mean, being so, having spent so much of my life like just playing games, I think the thing that I've always felt has been strongest in the games that I've played has been a feeling of encapsulating a feeling with a mechanic, right? That's the thing that if you can capture the feeling of like swinging a blade, or taking a hit, or being in a moral dilemma, those sort of things. If you can capture that, that's when I feel like the games I've played previously have been strongest. And so, really early on, those were things that we were trying to keep. Like, okay, if you're going to make mechanics combat in a game, how do you do that? And so that's where the push your luck element came in, is because you don't know what's going to happen when you swing a blade at somebody always, and you can try and swing it harder by rolling loads of dice, or you can be a bit more protective, but you won't quite get so many the high highs. And the same thing with the feeling of like in combat, where you always get this feeling when you're watching movies of like there's an exchange back and forth, and there's always this kind of flow to the combat where somebody's getting the upper hand and then they're getting pushed back again and they're coming back again, and then one overcomes the other. That feeling then kind of turned into the battle flow system, which then had the card management, where you're playing a card to attack somebody, but then you need to use the card to defend yourself, and then you need to keep breathing to keep moving around. Because if you've ever done it, like I actually used to run a bit of for some of the kids, we used to have a medieval battle reenactment type thing. We used to have these big old foam swords and big shields and the plate mail helmets. See all the helmets up there, and just stick those on the kids and get them to batter each other. And like, if you ever do anything that's like even close to how fighting really works, you're just so tired so quickly, and you need to like keep breathing, keep like reserving your energy. And so trying to capture that feeling of a fight and then transferring that into the way that you have your battle flow around the board, where you're kind of pushing things around, and if you use a card, you're not getting it back until you use other things to kind of push around. That's the real attempt of it. Is every mechanic in our game really needs to pull its weight in terms of capturing a feeling about how you do combat. And then same thing with the story, really. Like, so one of the mechanisms, for instance, in the story is that we don't tell people the rewards they will receive for making moral decisions, because as soon as you tell people there's going to be bonuses, or there's going to be a thing that you get if you do this particular thing, it stops being a choice and becomes a game, right? You're deciding gamification, like, what do I need to do right now to be able to get the most efficient, exit to this situation? So we did away with all that. So the narrative part of the game really is like you're going through, and all you have is the information that your character would have in the world. It's it's second person, where it says you are here. This is the information. You make a decision. What do you want to do? And then the player has to make that emotionally and based on what they've seen, but they have no information, and then they make that choice, and it could be bad, it could be good, it could be a bit of both, it could be a grey area, and there's all this stuff they can do. So living in the grey is what we say. like you're trying to live in this grey area, you're living in this grey area of like, there's often like the lesser of two evil stuff going on, just hard life choices that people would really have in that situation. So the same thing, we try and say like stuff like we don't have anyone saying stuff that a normal person wouldn't say in that situation. So it's not like, verily, dear sir, you have shamed me, so like, no, it's like a realistic conversation that people are having. If you were stuck in this horrible city in the middle of the Deepwood where life kind of sucks, like, what would you be saying? So you have some people who kind of end up with this kind of gallows humor. Some people would be, they're quietly optimistic and just try and keep their hopes up. Others drown it in a bottle. It's how do different people deal with that world?
Nothing like our world today. I don't know how to relate to any of that.
It's all going to hell in a handbasket. That's the cool thing, I think. It's like capturing capturing those feelings is where I've came from. So, and then just seeing if we can get that in the game. And hopefully we've done that with a few of the mechanics and things. We actually had to design some new mechanics to make that happen, of course, because that was part of the thing is sometimes in capturing, I think you have to go to a new place with it to make it feel right. And so we, the battle flow things, the combat system, and the twisting tails thing where you go around the map and how you do that, some things that we kind of had to build around this desire to capture that particular feeling, what to get with this grim dark world,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it is an ambitious game to say the least. And if people haven't, you can So we'll have a link to the Kickstarter. You can see the full details of how it works, but there's a lot going on in it. And especially for a new company, for this to be your debut game, was there ever a point where you thought that maybe you wanted to start with a smaller game or 2 or 3 smaller games and put those out there, get your name out there before jumping into a giant project like this one? Or what was the process like behind that decision?
It doesn't sound wise, does it? Now I think about it.
Well, in a way, I think there is some wisdom to it, because we do see that being very successful, and we did, for example, we've seen like Gloomhaven was maybe there in some ways it's almost a smarter path. I don't know if you took any of that into account.
Yes, I mean, interesting. Just from a market-facing perspective, like there is that part of it where generally, because people, different groups, different companies, people trying to bring games to market often don't have huge budgets, and so like if you don't have a huge budget, you can't develop a game this big, and so it's part of that is actually you naturally, just because of the way that different companies have different budgets, you actually put yourself in a place where there's very few contenders for that type of thing. So it actually, like, but being able to have that budget has really helped us to be able to put the game like in a space where very few other companies can do. It's really, you're talking about the Simons of the world, you're talking about the Awakened Realms, you're talking about these massive companies that are, running these huge campaigns and things. And we're able to place ourselves right in the middle of that because of that thing. But of course, that meant risking a heck of a lot. Right? It meant being prepared to risk, and so there is no part of making a game that isn't risky, right? You're risking your time, you're risking your money, you're risking, the best parts of your life, right? I mean, we've on the team, we've had 4 births. I've had 2 children whilst developing this game, and like there's trades. It's really hard. Like you just want to spend as much time as you can with your kids, but like I'm constantly aware that if I wasn't developing this game, I'd be able to spend more time with my children. And so there's that risk is a tough thing to square with yourself, but at the same time, if you really believe it, I think if you've got like a passion, like I feel that this is gonna be worth that in the end of the day. Like we're going to be able to make something that people are going to care about, and we can make something that like it could be so exciting if we can just get it to land. We'll have made this crazy dream thing. And really, like for instance, like this game wasn't possible 10 years ago. Like before Kickstarter, this game would never have existed. It's it's too big, it's too ambitious to be able to bring into the world other than in this new dichotomy. And so Kickstarter, and this is part of the reason why actually we had to go Kickstarter exclusive with it, because we just knew, having talked to distributors, and we spent time talking to people about the kind of ways of getting that to retail, but the actual full game with the mystery box and all the mystery stuff in it and stuff it's just such a costly process. We knew we'd never be able to get it into shops, so it's just only in Kickstarter can this thing be made. So it's a lot of risk, so you got to be okay with risk when you get into the games thing. And I it really does give me a lot of risk. Having gone through this process, it gives me so much respect for people who are prepared to do that. Like behind all these companies and behind all these boxes, there's actually lives that are behind each box, and there's people who have given up a good portion of their life to try and make a thing. And it's a brave thing to try and do. So I really respect anyone who's prepared to try and put themselves out there to make that, especially with all the flack you're going to receive on the internet the second you kind of put stuff out there. And
on the topic of risks, I noticed in the Kickstarter and the risks, when you obviously talk about delays, things that happen, you mentioned not only the 4 kids not slowing you down, but a severed thumb.
Yeah, that was one of our writers, Paul DeStefano. His actual day job, weirdly, is that he was a blacksmith. So that he was like, we wanted a writer who was really like heart and soul, dark fantasy kind of guy, and so he literally kind of got more of a fantasy writer than a guy who spends his days pounding on metal in a hot forge and then writing like some vigilante writer by night. So it was excellent. We've actually got another writer on team who's actually almost a professional. I think he's a professional. I don't want to say which side of that he's on, but he's a full-on like reenactor, and so he spends his spare time on a horse with a lance, whilst he's so he's like, when he's off his horse he's writing, but when he's on his horse he's in plate mail like that. So we've got an amazing team of eclectic talent. Paul had basically an industrial accident and managed to nearly chop his whole thumb off. So they had to sew it back on, and so he's got a great kind of like Frankenstein thumb now with the kind of things around the top.
Maybe that's an event you should add to this game somehow if that's ever a stretch goal.
Yeah, yeah. But BGG is calling out for a Terran model with a severed thumb, because Paul does this great little forum in BGG where he basically plays the part of a real life a fableman in World, and so people have been crying out for a severed thumb fableman as well.
We've throughout this interview you mentioned a lot about space. Making sure that you have your game stands out because there's a space for it to fill. So how does Oathsworn, what is the space it is filling out compared to, other people are obviously going to mention games like we mentioned Gloomhaven, Kingdom Death. There are heavy campaign legacy games technically fall under this too. How do you make people understand that your game stands out above the pack?
Well, something in the early days that when I was watching a lot of reviews of some of these bigger games and just generally I suppose a lot of trying to find a game that's worth making is feeling out the sentiment in the community, like what are people saying about other things and how are they reacting to it. And one of the things that kind of kept coming back clearly through things that people said is they want a story that's worth telling. They want to have a story that's worth playing through, something that really is because it's weird, we kind of currently we have a divide almost between stories and games. So I suppose AAA, and this was actually true of computer games back in the day, right? In early 90s computer game stuff, few of them had good stories, but a lot of them in the earliest forms they were more mechanical things. It was all about jumping over things or doing a thing. The story wasn't so front and center. And then as that kind of as that community evolved, it became much bigger about stories. Right now you've got AAA computer games with Hollywood stars who are now acting in computer games telling these amazing stories that are millions of words long. So I feel that's where we're going to go more in board gaming as well. There's this opening space of having narrative board games that are experience games as well. They're a sort of we've all fallen in love with stuff like the exit games and things like that, or the kind of escape room type in a box games, and the legacy games. Right, they're experiences that are kind of one-off experiences that you've done it, and it's this is amazing. I'm glad I did that, and now I'm going to move on to another experience type thing. And so those two things kind of combine really well. A story is something you can kind of go through once, and you can go back to it again, but that story is this powerful moment in your life, right? And the same thing with those books. So bringing those two things together, it felt like there's a chance to do that on a massive level, right? There's a chance to do an experience game that is huge. It's 15 plus chapters. Every time you do a set play session, you've got a different story and a different boss with different mechanics, and you're unlocking all these mysteries and unlocking cool things that you have from envelopes and everything. And you do that over the course of this massive story that you're actually engaging in. That felt like it was something that I'd want to play. Right, when we first started out, it's okay, I'd like to play something that was a story that was there, because the kind of orcs, elves, and dwarves thing it's been done a lot. It's an awesome. I love Lord of the Rings. It's been done a lot, but it's excellent. But I think that one thing that you're kind of hearing from people is they want new worlds to explore. They want new ideas to explore, and that was part of that thing. And then you had to combine that then with the mechanisms of the game, right? Because it's is there a way of landing that such that it feels new and fresh in the mechanics? And that's where what came back to what we were talking about before, encapsulating those experiences. Can you bring those so that they evoke emotion, right? Because experiences are about emotion. So how can you evoke emotion with mechanics? So the way that you push your luck and stuff like that, and when you're fighting stuff like that, the way that you're feeling this. There's often, I think some games have these amazing kind of these flow moments where you get into a flow of the game and you're push that there, that goes there, I get double reward and experience that comes into this thing that lets me do this, unlocks the new thing that I can do which I couldn't, and it's just this lovely kind of flow that generates emotion. And so hopefully we've managed to capture a bit of that with the mechanics as well as this overall mystery story sort of thing.
I mean, the exploding dice with both the dice and cards, I know we've had plenty of fun stories of making or failing miserably. And without spoiling too much, I really do love some of the choices you make. Without mentioning, there's a certain character, which if you choose to play as, I guess role may be the better word. If it's in their party, you actually go to a separate sort of question tree where you make another choice. So that was another really fun thing because it felt a bit more like the world reacted with how you guys actually all chose your team. Your choices that you don't think matter will actually make a bit more story beats as the campaign goes along.
I remember that, like, amongst my friends, we still talk about moments we had in D&D 10 years ago as a moment. It becomes a trope, it becomes a meme, it becomes this sort of thing that kind of is bigger than the moment itself. And it's trying to be able to put that in a box where you're having these moments. And Eric Lang actually says really the thing that stuck with me a long time ago, which was that you design for highs and lows sometimes. Like, you don't actually want to have this kind of mediocre experience in the middle where everything is exactly the same every time necessarily. There's I'm paraphrasing him here, I'm probably doing great injustice to him, so I apologize. but the idea that the potential to have great highs and moments that are like amazing and just feel awesome has to accompany the potential for there being some lows. And so, like, in games design, it's often like, how do you mitigate the lows so you're not feeling overly punished by that, and then how do you then open it up though for these amazing moments of awesomeness where people are feeling like great heroes and capturing that experience, because that's what you want. It's a hero fantasy. We're trying to have some escapism where you're actually feeling awesome for a moment, but with value to that. Because if everybody's super awesome all the time and if everyone's Superman, it's not a great experience necessarily, right? Because no one can die, no one can have anything, there's no danger, there's no threat. So folks keeping it more on that realistic level, which I think is why we all love Marvel. Like, part of the reason why we love Marvel films, right? Like, Marvel films they managed to keep the heroes human and keep them. There was always a sense of threat for them around it. That sort of became part of the design philosophy as well.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect example. Everyone always compares the DC that are basically gods, some of them literally gods, versus, that's true in Marvel too, but usually they have a human element to it. Yeah, you got to find that balance, like you said, of the highs and the lows. I also think that one of the ways you want to try to create those memorable experiences comes from the element of surprise, of perhaps not knowing what you're going to get going into something. And that's something you guys have definitely embraced with Oathsworn. In fact, a lot of campaign or legacy games have secrets inside of them. They have things, narrative elements or otherwise, that you discover as you play. But in the case of Oathsworn, it's not just limited to that. It's entire minis, a lot of minis, big minis, the bosses that you don't want people to look at if they can help it until they reach that point in the story. So how do you strike that balance between keeping that element of surprise alive and allowing the consumer to still get a glimpse of what they're getting with the product?
I think it's still very much an open question whether or not we found the right balance. We were debating this literally up to the last moment, just how much because part of me in the early days, we were like, wouldn't it be cool, like, if you could make a game that was this elaborate and extravagant, but literally hide it so that every single thing was a mystery to people, almost like all these things. And if you could just make it so, and then as we sort of spent time talking about that, we talked to enough of the community that were like, actually, I would want to know, if I want to have the choice, I want to know kind of what's coming in some of these things. I want to be able to know that my investment, because it's an expensive game, so I want to know that the investment is worth it. And so that's when we started pulling it back from the full mystery and into like, okay, well, then maybe we can show a tiny little bit, and then so notice, like, for instance, on the Kickstarter page, we've got a couple of models, right, and they're a small part of a much larger range that's in the game, but it gives you an idea of like, this is how big and impressive and kind of like unique all these different things are, but it just gives you on a very, very small level. And then you've got that wall where you have the mystery box, and if you want to, you can click it and you can see it, but if you don't want to, you can reserve that. And really, what it's almost like maybe your future self will thank you for that if you for that thing, because you're going to gain a mystery later on, that a little bit more mystery later on, but then there's a good reasons for looking at it now as well. So it's like we didn't want to take the choice away from the community, people just have the right to choose those things. Because that's also the other thing, I suppose, is about making, like, you don't want to make decisions for people. People have the right to make the decision themselves. So why make that choice when we can with a button, like, save people from that. But obviously there's actually one thing that we did save, which is there is a final encounter box. There's a one mystery box that no matter what happens, we're not showing what's in that box, right? So that then everybody's going to experience that final thing as a new new experience. But yeah, like, I mean, that idea of the mystery obviously is really ties, because it's like, I suppose it's a bit like reading the last page of a book, right? Like, you don't want to read that. You don't want to skim through a book and look at like 15 different pages and like hear that somebody died or something happened. You know, you start a book and then you read through it. So keeping that mystery was really important to us. How do we preserve it whilst also convincing people this game is worth their time to look at? Because you can't just be like, oh, trust me, this is wonderful, you're going to love it. You know, just it is really difficult, and hopefully we struck a balance. I mean, one of the things, and this I suppose is another thing about wider game development, is we took a lot of advice from people. We came to you guys, didn't we? We had a chat. And
that was a really bad choice on your part.
We came to you guys because we trust your opinion. We love you guys, and we decided, right, let's try and put it out to a bunch of people we respect. Because it's another thing is it's not always wise to trust every voice, and like just. I mean, generally the group has a good strong view. So we're often doing polls and stuff. Is really good on BGG. That's really valuable for getting kind of wide data on information. But then also just like finding people that you trust and that you know are kind of like solid. Then asking them what they think. And often, I mean, like amongst this like group of a dozen or so people we asked about this, we got back a diverse range of opinion, which was great. There were good arguments over here and good arguments over there, and it's probably somewhere in between here and here because they both represent different parts of the community. Different audiences for different people would kind of maybe lean more one way or another depending on where they sit. So then it was kind of just and it really is it's a dark art, right? Like working out that thing. I don't know if we've got the right answer. We just hope we have. But that's a lot of that, especially when it comes to these decisions that aren't black and white, they're grey. Like you just got to just try and do the best you can really with it, and just try and be as professional as you can with it, and yeah, just and at the end of the day you have to make a decision and then own it. I also think that you can get into danger if you just make a decision, then you backtrack on it, then you come back on it, and you go back on it. You're taking the information, then you just make a decision and go for it. So that's where we've at with this mystery stuff, is we're hiding a good amount, but we're letting people choose to go through it if they want to be able to see what they're getting, so they can make an informed choice on buying the game.
I mean, we're more fans of the mystery in particular. I mean, I don't know how many times Jonathan and I have griped about movie trailers releasing everything. So it has to be admitted, we sort of have an advantage over people because we've been able to try out the game and see what it's actually like. And we have enjoyed it a lot. Now, for other people, they haven't. And, you know, there's always the chance that someone may miss out and decide not to back it. And then this game becomes huge. I mean, I'm betting that this is going to do well. I think a lot of people are going to like this. But this is a Kickstarter exclusive. You say in your Kickstarter, you know, there's a lot of high production costs. This isn't something very simple to do. So you're just doing it through the Kickstarter right now. How do you balance that? Like, let's say this does become the next huge thing that everyone really likes and a lot of people miss out on. And, you know, for those people, they don't want to have to pay, you know, 10 times the price from a third party marketplace. So how do you balance that? Do you have a contingency plan if Oathsworn becomes huge and be like, all right, we're already ready to do the second print run?
I mean, in terms of like where the focus is, I think in the team at the moment is that we want to make sure that we get the game done well and out like in time, and that's all of our effort is kind of poured into getting the game finished. Like for instance, that's one of the reasons why people have asked us about, can we buy more content for the game? They're more like gameplay add-ons and stuff like that you can buy for the game, and we've had to say like no, honestly, because we don't want to split focus on the game. We want to make sure this game is as good as it's going to be, and because there's always that thing that it's almost like you can always be making extra money by selling new stuff and adding things on, but ultimately that does mean that there's probably some sort of split of focus, or there's something. I mean, unless you get super big and you have this amazingly large company, you can actually have two different teams working on those two different bits of content. That's fine, but I think if you've got one team and you've only got X amount of time, you really want to focus on that one thing. So that's one of the reasons why we've that's what we're kind of focusing on in terms of where we'd go from here. Like once we got that game made, that's when we'd be able to look at, I mean, obviously it makes a lot of sense to come back to Kickstarter again in the future at some point with it. It's nearly every kind of game of this size has kind of done that at some point. They kind of return when they know that there's enough call from the community to want to see it again. And obviously Gloomhaven famously did very well on the second run as people kind of didn't know. I mean, it was a great mystery game, right? Gloomhaven had this amazing amount of kind of mystery to it, and that had, I mean, did really well there, like 10,000, I think, something back as the first time. Then it came back and did 40,000 back as the second time when people were really convinced by that. So yeah, I think that's one of the ways you provide for the community. I think, and that is that at some point in the future you make it available for them again, so that they can get it. I mean, obviously with Gloomhaven, that was the cheapest it could ever be. Was the first time you could get it. You couldn't possibly get it as cheap. I mean, I don't have any money at all of that first one. Probably didn't. But that the second time it was more expensive. So there is always that kind of thing. But I'm hoping we don't ever have to. I'm hoping we don't have to increase the cost on that thing. I mean, I hope that we'll be able to bring it back at the same level. But I don't like the idea of making it more expensive for people if they missed it the first time or anything like that.
Yeah. You want to get it into the hands of as many people as possible, ideally, who want to play it. So I know you just said that all of your focus right now is on just getting this game perfect and getting it up on Kickstarter. That being said, I gotta ask, do you have any plans? Are there any plans for beyond Oathsworn, whether that be expansions for the game or totally different projects that you have somewhere written down in a notebook somewhere, other designs that you've been working on? What do you have in mind once this one is out there?
So this is one of my notebooks I have. This is the third one I've been through since developing Oathsworn, with all of the notes on and everything. And me and Toby spend these endless hours with the whiskies working out different stuff for the for things. And a lot of the ideas for stuff that where we could take this actually happened before we were in full development with this game, because obviously in those early days it's all just these sparks of ideas and cool stuff coming up. And so we had a bunch of things that we would love to have seen to do that we couldn't fit into this game, just like component wise and just in development time wise we couldn't fit it in. So there are a few expansion things that we had ideas for, and there's a bigger story as well that we want to tell as part of this. So the game is one of the things we wanted to have as part of this game is the idea that you didn't have to buy any more content to enjoy this game. Like, this is a story. The story is finished, like at the end of that story, and you have this you have a culmination of everything that you go through. So you don't need to buy a second game or add-ons and stuff to enjoy it. But then if people really enjoy it, we'd love to support the world, right? Because we're really passionate about this world. We love this, the Deepwood and the cities and the free companies, and there's so many cool places you can go with this idea that we'd love to kind of flesh that out more for people. So if people really like it, we can build some more and do more games. And so we're prepared to do that. I mean, this is another thing I suppose that's worth addressing when it comes to company development formation. It's like, how committed are you to people? Like, you have to be pretty committed to put 3 years of your life in something with only spending money rather than ever receiving money. That's a long time. It's going to be years past that as well, I can imagine, before we see anything coming in rather than going out. But so that's being able to commit to a really big portion of time, being able to be passionate about something enough to know that that's where you want to spend a good portion of your life is quite important. And then part of that is then part of that decision is this going to be something that you're doing for the next 20 years? Like, could you say I'm going to commit myself to this? And I suppose you have the same thing, don't you, when you're a YouTuber, right? Like, you're building a community, you're committing to a community. Like, you guys probably had the same conversation at some point, like, are we going to do this? Are we going to actually commit long term to these guys and do this? Because it's a lot of your life, isn't it? Putting the videos together and engaging.
Too much. Wasted. Yeah, you want to decide where you are best serving your own interests on multiple different levels.
Yeah,
I will say you did come out at least with a very cool world. I loved entering the Deepwood and seeing some of the monsters, which unfortunately, we can't talk about. But you have shown off the playable characters, your Oathsworn, and I'm curious, do you have a favorite, whether it's mechanically or you just aesthetically you find to be your favorite?
Oh, well, one of my favorites I can't actually talk to you about yet, so I'm going to have to talk about a different one.
Of course.
A different one. Personally, so if I go back to my MMO days, I'm a tank at heart. I like defending people. That's my thing. So I really enjoyed the Warden gameplay as a thing. The idea of, because he's got a lot of interrupts, and the idea is that his part of his job, I mean, he can do lots of damage. You can actually spec him to do full damage, but part of his job is protecting the group. He's got the plate, he's got a shield, he can step in if he and kind of protect people. So the idea of positioning yourself in such a way as you can guard someone's back with a shield, I've always loved the idea. Like, you know, if there was like an avatar of me somewhere, it'd be like me holding a shield out trying to say that's kind of where I'd like to be pictured. So yeah, the warden is kind of one of my, is what plays to my natural kind of role thing. How about you guys? What do you guys enjoy when you were playing?
I was a sucker, I think, for the I thought that he was really cool. Also, just aesthetically, where he had like.
You might have mentioned the particular thing you weren't supposed to mention.
Wait, that was. I mean, I was a sucker for the Ranger because I like the staying away from combat at times. That one in particular has the new race, so to speak. You know, it's not just an elf. Yeah,
there was quite a fun one to kind of design the race of the Adendri and how they kind of grow in these groves, and they don't speak. They speak through the spores, and then like, what would a culture look like if it spoke through its spores, like transmission wise, and like how would you do like gender differences in that kind of thing? And we had that so that like the males grew throughout their lives, never stopped growing, like, so they just kept growing and growing and growing, where the females did stop growing, but their spores became more potent as they kind of grew, and so they kind of had and then it was like this thing about spores, like, does it work the same way as language? Like, if I talk to you, I can't compel you to do anything. I can try and convince you, but I can't compel you. But with the spores, like when it's a chemical reaction, maybe there's a way of like the more potent spores actually like dominating others, and then it became this whole kind of like societal thing about, you know, how the matriarchs can actually dominate lesser, you know, like younger like males and females with the power of their spores, and they built up a whole society around that. And yeah, then they became refugees who then there were people who wanted to escape that kind of tyranny and came to Verum, and they formed the Green Streets, which was like this quarter that's only for them, that then kind of there's the xenophobia that plays into that. There's a whole thing there, but yeah, it all came out of really the desire to not have an elf and to have
from humble.
Yeah, forget those elves.
We don't need them. So there's so much juicy lore. I'm a big lore head.
Even the small things is I don't remember where it came up in the story. If you just told us how, like, because they communicate through spores, you know, humans don't really send out spores. They have sort of a tapping mechanism to talk, almost like their own sign language, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, they have to knock. So they do this knock thing. Kind of thing. There's a language in it. That was one that Paul DiStefano came up with. The guy who lost the thumb. Using the thumb, he really found his inner self and tried to create a new language. So we've got the knock. The knock is his baby, where the people can. There's like a trading language between some of the races, because the Ursus as well aren't big on talking, more big on biting than talking. They also, the knock is something that anyone can do as long as you've got, you know, thumbs. Sorry, Paul.
That's rough. That's harsh.
It's all right. They sewed it back on. It's fine. It's good.
All right. Now we're going to end our show, as we always do, by asking the same two questions that we always ask. This is sort of our bonus lightning round, but you can take as long as you want to answer. So the first question is there a current trend in the tabletop games industry that you're either particularly excited about or that you're particularly worried about? If you have an answer for one of those or either. I
mean, they kind of going back to the answer we're talking about. What is really exciting me is this idea of mystery in board games, and the idea of it becoming experience becoming a central thing. I can see more and more that games, because in reality we've kind of know that. You know, of all these games on my shelf here, I've played them, but I've maybe only played them a few times each, right? Like, because there's just so much variety and wonderful stuff you want to get into. Yeah. And I think that the community, the creating community might understand that more and more that's the trend we're going into, is actually making games for shorter, more powerful experiences. And then I think there's a whole bunch of new stuff that kind of can come in there where you're designing games for one-off unique experiences. And obviously, so this game fits into that world where each, you know, you've got these chapters, but each one is designed to be a unique one-off experience. But then, like, just seeing where everyone else is going to take that, I think it's going to be really, really exciting. I don't know what I think about AR yet. I'm not sure quite where that's it feels like I love virtual reality. I've got my Vive. I can't play spaceship games because it makes me sick. So hopefully there's no spaceship board games maybe they are that will make me sick. But but yeah, like there could be some really cool digital interaction like between like physical components. But I think at some level you don't want to move too far into computer games with it. So I don't know. I think part of me maybe is a little worried about that as well, that if we end up going too far down that route, we might lose something that makes board games special. The physicality, the tactility is so precious to us. So I don't know. And I mean, one of the things actually we had with the design of the game is we found early on, we did a poll about physical storybook or companion app or both. And when we were saying, look, if we we actually framed the question about saying, look, would you buy a game if it had to be $5 or $10 more expensive if you had a physical book that was like this big that had all the stuff in it, right? And or if it was a bit cheaper that you just had a companion app in. And in the end, people pretty overwhelmingly voted to keep both. They wanted to have both of those in there. They didn't mind about spending extra money. Ironically, in the end, we didn't end up adding that extra money to the cost of the game, so it didn't matter anyway. We just ended up having just a cheaper game with both of them in. But that's I think that was quite an interesting thing there. That people are worried. One of the questions that came out of that is people are worried about the obsolescence of companion stuff, like companion apps and things. They're worried that if a company doesn't support it, I mean, our software developer complains at me about my phone because when I try and run the app on this phone as it is currently, this one apparently is so old, like Android itself doesn't support my phone as a thing. And so that was one of the considerations we had to do. It's like, okay, we need to future-proof this app then. So we need to design a series, like in the budget, we need to be able to design that we're going to be updating and improving the app over years and years and years of time, so that we can make sure that it's still running. And then if ever there was a time that we weren't around, we need to make it so people can still play the game. So like that's where the physical book comes in. That no matter what happens, you've always got the book that works. And obviously we'd be able to release the audio files to people in ways they'd be able to play it, whatever, as a thing there. But yeah, the idea that technology changes so fast, it may actually cause problems with board games is still, because I mean, you can't go wrong with a piece of paper and a bit of cardboard, unless you leave it in the rack, unless you have a leak.
No,
which
it's definitely an interesting balance.
Yeah, and I mean, I know both of us are interested in virtual reality. I am extremely intrigued by possibly the integration of AR and stuff into board games. I think there's some really cool possibilities that you could have there. And last question, is there a game that you're playing right now that you could recommend to people, or that you think more people should be playing?
I have absolutely loved this game. This is so flipping good. The guy who put this together is a genius. There is just some amazing, like from a games designing point of view, like the numbers behind this game are just insane. Like, this it is the Bejas game. It's awkward guests. It's kind of like I suppose it's like a gamer's version. Well, I say gamer's version, but it's like Cluedo is in that. It's like a much more gamery, like high-end gamery kind of veteran gamery version of Cluedo, where you can try and work out what's happened, but it's much more mechanical. So you can really infer a lot from that, and because there's no like roll to move stuff or anything like that, then you're getting a fair chance at it. Personally, I found it really good at 2 players, really really good. Me and my wife played that all through our holiday, which was just me going on to Ireland to film more content and us having some evenings together. But yeah, that was wonderful at 1 to 2 players. Didn't feel quite so tight at I think we played it at 5 or 6, but then so few games ever are so like super tight at 5 or 6. But yeah, Awkward Guess was great. Yeah, that's been really good.
That's worth noting, I think, if it's like a deduction mystery game that is good with 2 players, because I feel like a lot of those are more of the party games that you need like 6 people or they don't even work. So it's nice to have something there. So this has been great to talk to you. Before we let you go, could you just tell people the Oathsworn right now is on Kickstarter? How can they find it? How can they follow you on Twitter, your website, anything else? Plug away.
Yeah, so we're on Kickstarter. So just searching on Kickstarter, Oathsworn into the Deepwood. We've got a BGG page, and we've got Facebook page. So Shadowborne Games is our company. Shadowborne Games, BORNE, and then we've got Twitter as well. So we're pretty active on all of those platforms. So just come and hi, and we've got a community group for Oathsworn, so that you come and natter to us about favourite porridge to take in the Deepwood and that sort of thing, and so the hopefully you'll be able to find us pretty easy on Kickstarter.
Yeah, I think it'll be out there. I think people will find it. They'll catch on.
I hope they realize there'll be a link in this description.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, definitely check out the description. We will have links. Thank you everyone for watching. Our guest today has been Jaime Jolly of Shadowborne Games. Check out links in the description below to follow him and find Oathsworn Into the Deepwood on Kickstarter right now. Until next time, I'm Jonathan.
I'm Will.
And this has been Roll for Crit Spotlight. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, go ahead, like and subscribe, and support our Patreon for even more board game content.
Support us now to hear the audio expansion, where you can hear all the other nerdy things we've been up to.